is a computer-generated reading of the Discourse, Proletariat Revolution in Post-Capitalist Society, by P.R. Sarkar. It appeared as Discourse number 18, in the publication titled, Universal Humanism, Proletariat Revolution in Post-Capitalist Society. Sadvipra shall work for the good of all countries, for the all-round emancipation of all humanity. The inevitable consequence of capitalist exploitation is proletariat revolution. When capitalists, maddened with excessive greed, lose their common sense completely and bid farewell to humanism totally, it is time for proletariat revolution to burst forth. But it will be futile to expect it just because of the ripe time. For this, conditions relating to place and person are also largely responsible. From the economic standpoint, where there exists two classes, the exploiting capitalists and exploited proletariat, revolution takes place at such a time indeed, but at such a time if there be no intellectuals and fighters. From the mental standpoint, or in other words if people are proletarian economically but not intellectuals or fighters mentally, proletariat revolution is not possible. Those that are mentally proletarians are not capable of bringing about revolution. They are battle-shy. They are the playthings of the capitalists. During the heyday of the capitalist era, capitalists easily kept in their clutches such proletarian-minded workers. They, even the martial-minded or intellectual workers, if they are not spirited enough, get themselves sold to the capitalists. Therefore, eventually, proletariat revolution has to depend on those workers who are sufficiently spirited and who are mentally intellectual or fighters. Without taking into account the mental caste, those who want to bring about the revolution of the proletariat only with the help of the working class, will come a cropper. The proletariat-minded people do not understand their own problems, nor do they have the courage to dream of their solution. No matter how well labor leaders make them understand their problems or lecture them with fiery language about the necessity of struggle, their minds remain uninfluenced. They just fill their bellies with wine and toddy and have a rollicking time of rowdy hell, and so pass their days. They have no time to think which of their family is starving or not getting any education. If their masters increase their wages, it only adds to their expenditure for booze. It does not raise their living standard. That is why I say such people do not bring about proletariat revolution. They cannot. To depend on them is not only undesirable but the height of foolishness on the part of those who want to bring about revolution. For their inertia will thwart the movement. Their cowardice will prematurely extinguish the fire of the revolution. This sort of mentality apart, native or religious traditions may also stand in the way of revolution. Not to speak of the proletarian-minded workers. It becomes extremely difficult even for the intellectual or martial-minded workers to get over the spell of such traditions. What is lauded cannot be blotted. Can a squirrel reap any useful harvest? What's the use? Days are passing somehow, aren't they? Subtly thinking, the policy seeking to establish a welfare state on a democratic basis, the ideal of Gandhism, or the tall talks of democratic socialism, are all actually great obstacles in the path of revolution. Yes, that is why I say that mass revolution will be brought about by intellectual and martially minded workers, and for this a lot of effort and preparation will have to be made by them. They will have to suffer a lot, sacrifice a lot, and fight against the opposing groups and ideologies. It is far too easy to talk big about revolution. Such gasconades, such tall talks, may easily strike the listeners with wonder and may also draw applause from them, but to bring about a real revolution is not at all easy. The pioneers of revolution, the martially minded or intellectual workers, will have to learn discipline, take proper training for the revolution, build their character and have to be moralists. In a word, they will have to be what I call Sadvipras. A Sadvipra may not like a person, but if he or she is not Hans, a Sadvipra will certainly take suitable measures against him or her. In such matters it will not do to give indulgence to any kind of mental weakness. Such strictly disciplined, ideal Sadvipras alone can be the missionaries of revolution. They alone shall carry the message of revolution to every corner of the earth, right into every vein and venule of human existence. The flying colors of the revolution, the banner of victory, shall remain in their hands alone. The moral and the virtuous may be found among both the rich and the poor. It is known to everybody that the notion that rich means dishonest and poor means honest is totally wrong. But in most cases Sadvipras will be found particularly in the middle-class society. By middle-class society I mean the intellectual or martially minded workers. It may be argued that, can a rich person, who is moral and virtuous, be a Sadvipra? In reply, I would say, yes, he or she can, but he or she will have to come down to the level of the bourgeoisie, for he or she shall not relax snugly with his or her ill-gotten capital and eat tiredly. In order to observe and abide by the rules of PROUT, he or she has to fight against wrong and injustice, and in order to continue this fight properly he or she shall cease to be a rich person, but will become middle class. The interpretation of the word Sadvipra is one who is a moral and virtuous person and fights against unjust policies. Earning money wrongfully or hoarding inordinate wealth runs counter to the fundamental principles of PROUT, without which proletariat revolution can never be successful. It may be argued again that, can a poor person be a Sadvipra? Yes, he or she can, but only those poor people who are martially minded or intellectuals can bring about revolution, and those very poor people I call the middle class. This is how I interpret the middle class. I do not see eye to eye with those that say the middle class people are those that do not do physical labor but render intellectual service, nor with those who say, those whose incomes are neither high nor low constitute the middle class. Taking the last interpretation of middle class, I see that there are many martially minded or intellectual workers in society whose incomes are far less than those of the proletariat-minded workers doing physical labor. If anybody takes exception to this appellation of middle class, or if anybody insists that middle class means those whose incomes are neither more nor less, and so the pioneers of revolution, the martially minded or the intellectual workers, may or may not be middle class, I am ready to use the term discontented or disgruntled workers, instead of middle class, for the revolutionary workers. This disgruntled workers' society is the eyesore of the tyrannical capitalists. Actually, the capitalists are not afraid of labor unrest, they are afraid of the labor leaders, these disgruntled workers. Constitutionally, the capitalists like democracy, for in a democratic setup they easily buy off the proletariat-minded workers by force of money. Numerically, these proletariat-minded workers are in the majority. At the time of election it is easy to sail across the election stakes after exhorting them with a mouthful of tall talks and promises. Thereafter no harm, even if they forget all about their tall promises, for the proletariat-minded workers themselves easily forget all about them. It can be asserted with emphasis that if, in any of the countries, only the educated people had been given voting rights instead of the general adult franchise, the administrative or state structures of most of the democratic countries would have played quite a different tune. If the voting rights had remained in the hands of the Sadvipras only, there would have been no difference at all between the world of reality and the heaven of imagination. The condition of the middle-class people, the disgruntled workers, is miserable in most of the countries having a capitalistic social system and democratic structure. The reason is that these are the people who are the greatest critics of capitalism and the greatest opponents of capitalistic exploitation. The numerical growth of such disgruntled workers is indeed prognostic of or presages a potential proletariat revolution. Therefore, those who want an exploitation-free world should help in maximizing the number of these disgruntled workers. Their extinction or their transformation into proletariat-minded workers is detrimental to revolution. All the Sadvipras of the world should be alert and vigilant so that the number of these disgruntled workers does not diminish as the result of unemployment problems, birth control or other different practices and policies.